We are in extremely interesting and exciting times for the acupuncture field. This medicine is thousands of years old and has went through a ton of different changes. It's the longest still alive practicing medicine, and it's practiced in almost every country of the world. It's very widespread and it's been around for a very long time. Despite that, only over the last 60 years have we really figured out and been able to measure exactly what acupuncture does, and it's very exciting to know what it does. Despite all that research, there's still a stigma around acupuncture that it's an energy medicine with meridian pathways, which are this idea of invisible pathways that we can't measure. And if that energy that's flowing through those systems isn't working properly, then there's disease. And that's an outdated model. We have a lot more information about how acupuncture works now, and for a while now, 60 years to be exact, very close to that. There was a researcher in China under the name Han Jisheng, and he did a lot of work for the acupuncture field in measuring how acupuncture works, and we've been able to compound off of that for the extenuating circumstances moving forward, and indefinitely to the amount of research that's been done in the last 10 years even. So there's 5 known mechanisms of how acupuncture works that I'll go over, and they're all very exciting and describe why you can treat such a vast array of different disorders. The first is a local or chemical effect. Every site of the needle stimulates different hormones and local tissues that have an effect in that local site. So if you have a cut, a bruise, a scar, a tear of a muscle, ligament, tendon, a bone, a fracture, something like that, any of those you would use the local mechanisms of acupuncture. And so when the needle's inserted, something called calcitonin gene-related peptide, which is a tiny peptide that our body naturally has, gets secreted, and all the blood vessels in the area as a response to that start to dilate. So they go from being normal or constricted to being dilated and open. And when that happens, all this fresh blood flows into the area. With blood comes all the things that our body can heal all on its own. And that's why acupuncture is natural, and that's why it's considered holistic, is there's nothing in the needles. All of it comes as a result of the needle stimulating certain tissues. With those things are histamine, serotonin, white blood cells, red blood cells, nerve growth factor, substance P, PGE, and prostaglandin. All those are either anti-inflammatory or some sort of way that the body can fight infection, create a healing state, or reproduce new stem cells or tissues in a damaged area. The local chemical effect of acupuncture is extremely potent, extremely safe, and works for 75% of the cases of things that I'm treating on a weekly basis. The next is the pain-killing hormone release. This is the endogenous opioid circuit of the body, and that's the release of beta endorphins, enkephalins, dynorphins, and orphanins. And you don't need to remember any of those, but just to remember that those are chemicals that our body use those are opioids, and they flow through circuits that the body already has to kill pain. Pain killing is a main function that we've developed as humans to be able to function and to be able to survive. And so we have these structures in our body already there to fight pain. Acupuncture enhances the use of those circuits and release of those hormones in very dramatic results and very dramatic amounts. So much so that there are specific frequencies with eStim that you can use with acupuncture to secrete more of these pain-killing hormones, and they work sometimes 500 times greater than morphine, which is why you hear acupuncture promoted for pain so much. The third is the spinal segmental approach. The spinal segmental approach indicates that there's either a specific nerve that's targeted, a specific nerve plexus, or a specific spinal segment. And all those are different aspects of neuroanatomy and how acupuncture stimulates those so that you can reach structures that may be correlated with the diseased tissue or may be correlated with the tissue that's related to it. So for example, you may hear, oh, this pressure point is good for headaches, or this acupuncture point is good for headaches. The reason it's good for headaches isn't some weird energetic model. It's that when you stimulate this nerve on the hand, it follows up the nerve track all the way up to C4 or C5, and at that point in the cervical plexus, it reaches a spinal segment of other nerves that also are stimulated and light up as a result of this being stimulated, and then every nerve in that area that meets at that junction is like a high traffic area, and they light up as well. Those happen to be correlated with other areas of the neck and face, and so that's why this point can be so helpful for headaches, because it can stimulate tissues and other nerves that are affected in the same nerve plexus, but it inherently doesn't do anything to the face itself. It just stimulates the nerves that are correlated with it. That's a beautiful thing. You can treat areas of the body like the gut from points on the legs or the limbs, the lower limbs, to be able to affect something internally, and it's because of that spinal segmental approach. Fourth is the central nervous system or neuropeptide mechanism of acupuncture. That one indicates that when you stimulate an acupuncture point and electroacupuncture is added to it that enhances it, that transmission again goes up that nerve pathway. But not only does it stimulate all of the nerves locally at the nerve plexus, like in the spinal segmental approach, but also that message gets sent up the spinal cord to an area in the brain where it then has an effect and releases a peptide somewhere in the brain, which is the central nervous system, that enhances or affects the whole body. The brain is the control center of the nervous system, which is the periphery, and for that reason you can use peripheral stimulation of acupuncture points to affect brain chemistry and whole body chemistry from the central nervous system. This is very potent in the treatment of neurological conditions as well as anxiety, depression, anything that has to do with biochemistry and some alteration in that in a negative way. Acupuncture helps through the central nervous system and neuropeptide mechanism. And finally, in the fifth of all the mechanisms is the myofascial trigger point aspect, and this is much more just for pain and for musculature. So if you have a trigger point in your pec that's causing your shoulder to be rotated forward, causing pain in the shoulder, a lack of range of motion or flexibility, and neck pain, what you would do is you would stimulate. What I do is take a needle and go directly into the myofascial trigger point. That relaxes and actually fires the muscle, what's called a fasciculation, to relax, at which point you can use other needles to break up any fibrotic tissue, reduce inflammation, and help with blood flow to regenerate any tears or damage done to the muscle. Those 5 mechanisms describe all that we know about how acupuncture works so far, and the research done into them has now compounded, and we've been able to see more little details that come from each of those, and that's very exciting, way more in depth, but all come from those 5 major mechanisms that we know about how acupuncture works.